have no ego. When you expect to be wrong, you cannot have ego. When I joined Confluent, I knew that I was the least experienced engineer. I would say I was the dumbest engineer. And I was at the time. I literally had 1 year of experience compared to people who had 10 plus in good companies. If you are surrounded by such people that are more senior than you, get the ego, like just destroy the ego and just be a sponge and absorb as much as you can. There's nothing that can go wrong with that.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the SaaS developer community where we learn from each other how to build amazing software. And with me today, I have Stan Kozlovski, until very recently from Confluent. Great having you here, Stan.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, so Stan and I worked together at Confluent for a bunch of years, and he has been probably the most promoted engineer I've worked with in my career. So he joined Confluent after someone at Confluent, and I don't know whom, ran across a blog post of his that he wrote explaining Kafka to junior engineers trying to learn Kafka and make sense of all the mess. And someone saw it and said, we should hire the guy. And they made good life choices. So Stan joined Confluent. And then I was already at Confluent, but I think about a year later or something, I joined the team that Stan was in. So we had fun working together. And then he basically got promoted from junior to an engineer, to a senior engineer, to a staff engineer, to a more senior staff engineer. And I think your last role has been to lead the self-balancing Kafka team. Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
And that was like 10 people or something. You led a giant team.
Yeah, no, we were large. We were maybe 12, I don't know, 11, 12.
Yeah, no, that's seriously impressive.
Wow.
Yeah, so obviously this is impressive enough that I decided to invite Stan to tell us what he learned that allowed him to get promoted again and again and again, and also tell us some of the lessons he learned while leading such a large team, and some advice on how to run large-scale Kafka. Are you ready, Stan?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's do it. Fantastic. Basically, you just left Confluent. And you were there during a period where Confluent, not just you got promoted again and again and again, Confluent grew by a lot. And both in terms of revenue, customers, clusters, employees, everything. You must have some good stories to tell. Can you tell us about one of your best experiences from that time?
Yeah, best experience. I don't know if I can pinpoint a single experience. I think it was just this sort of stream and flow of constantly very good experiences just coming in and coming in. You have to be, where I was at, I didn't know anything about Kafka. I was programming in a new language. So it was a steady stream and steady flow of just new things being learned about Kafka, new things being learned about the cloud, about programming in Java, customer incidents happening, us talking about new features. That's the beauty of a startup. You're always exposed to novelty. Novelty comes in, and that sort of keeps you.
But you must have some incident that stands out, or some project that was like, whoa.
Yeah, okay. Let me give you one. When we were shipping Kafka to work on Azure back in the day in 2019, Confluent Cloud only ran on AWS and GCP. And I was part of the sort of virtual team that was supposed to ship Kafka.
You were the Kafka engineer on the team.
Yeah. And it was, it sounded like something easy. We basically did our homework and researched the instance types and the disks. And we sort of tried to find similar ones to what we use on the other clouds. We're like, okay, given, these sort of resources, we should be able to achieve this sort of throughput.
How hard can it possibly be?
Right, it cannot be, right? So we did that, and the throughput was, just not there, and we couldn't explain why. The latencies were also extremely high. We had P999s of multiple seconds, unexplained.
That's crap.
Yeah, that was awful. What ensued after was a bunch of performance testing, a bunch of changing configurations and debugging what it could be. And I learned so much from that project specifically. That was a memorable project because somehow I feel like that was the most effort I had to put into a single project in Confluent. despite having worked on a lot of difficult things, I think this was just a little bit outside of my breadth. And what I learned a lot about Linux from that project, from Dan Lamotte, a very good senior engineer, now at Superblocks.
Yes.
We were debugging, all the Linux parameters in what Azure was setting, and we had, I think we changed a couple of parameters. The first was the NR requests parameter, which basically, if I understand correctly, tells you how many I/O requests does the OS buffer before sending it to the block device. Yeah, and that was set to a large number. So that partly explained the very high P999 latencies. Other things we play around with was the dirty background ratio and the dirty ratio. This is on the flushing.
And those are Kafka parameters, right?
Yeah, they influence Kafka quite a lot. And we had to play with those. We had to change the caching type on the Azure's disk types. Azure offers a few, a set cache types. They define it. Azure defines what the cache type is on the disks. We had to play around with those. And I remember we had this one scare from documentation. And in these sorts of projects, we were so deep in the cloud provider's documentation that you start to see all of these inconsistencies that they have, all of these contradictions, all this outdated information as well. We had the documentation once said that if you push the disk at its maximum IOPS for a sustained period of time, the virtual machine may shut down temporarily.
That's fun. That's just the right time you want the machine to shut down? Not?
That's awful, right? Imagine a customer pushing their Kafka to the limit and then the cluster just shuts down. So we were dealing with things like that. We were running tests against it, trying to reach out to people from Azure to understand. Thankfully, this wasn't true. I don't know why it was in the documentation, but yeah. So that's one story I would give.
So, did you ever blog about that? Like, there's so many good tuning tips that you just shared that I bet 99% of the listeners, 99% of people using Kafka have never even heard of, that you have to tune the dirty buffer ratio in the kernel in order to get best performance from Kafka. Did you ever write the ultimate guide for tuning Kafka for Azure?
No, I should do it. And we should have done it at the time, but at the time we had so little bandwidth. Blogging was the last thing on our mind. But that would have been a great blog post.
That's what my engineers keep telling me every time we figure something out. No, we have to run off to the next project. We absolutely cannot spend any time blogging it. But now you have plenty of time, so you should get to work about blogging all this knowledge. Yeah, so I also wanted to share my favorite standard Confluent story.
Okay.
For me, it was the very first time we met. I don't know if you remember. I just joined the Kafka team. I wasn't even leading anything at the time. And I got this project to do some, if someone deletes the cluster, make sure the data gets deleted, but with a delay. There was this large project. And it wasn't even that large, but there was a hard deadline for GDPR reasons. And I think you were helping out with doing some of the validation. And I flew off to London, actually for a very different reason. I was speaking at QCon in London that was going on at that time. So I was stressed out of my mind, trying to get a feature to work, trying to get a good talk for the conference, running all over the place. I just flew in 12 hours something. And I was not in the best shape of my life. I landed in this office that, as you described really well on your goodbye post on LinkedIn, it was half empty, half salespeople. So I kind of landed there and all the salespeople are talking on the phone, like, what am I even doing there? I sit myself down, I try to get to work. And the next thing I remember is you running over. I don't know if you even introduced yourself, but you were like, Gwen, I think I found a bug in the consumer. And you looked so happy about finding a bug in the consumer. And I love debugging. Like, it's my favorite engineering activity, is actually tracking down bugs and figuring out why things went wrong. And I was like, I think I found my people, someone who is actually happy to find a bug in software. And I don't even remember if it turned out to be a bug or not. I just remember how happy I was to see you and how happy you looked at the idea that you may have found a bug in the consumer.
That's a great story. I don't remember that bug. It must not have been a bug, I guess. But
It either haven't been a bug or maybe it was an easy one and we just fixed it and moved on. You contributed quite a bit to the consumer over the years. And you became a committer. So I think maybe you just don't remember every consumer bug you found and fixed.
I do remember you in the office, though. That was good times. I remember also you doing the presentation last minute. I was wondering how you lived like that. I could have never.
Oh, so the trick for it is that you have a lot of prepared material. So it was 2019. I was just off, I think, a year and a half in marketing. And before that, I was a year in product management. I was giving talks nonstop, right? So I had this giant pile of presentations on my laptop, and I could very easily stitch out new and interesting stories out of a lot of materials that I already had. So yeah, it's like, I think it was the Hulk that said it, that the secret is to always be angry. So for me, it's to always be prepared to give it. The secret to giving good talks is to always be prepared to give a talk. And then you don't have to prepare.
Always be talking. That's
yeah, exactly. During your time at Confluent, you basically got promoted and you got promoted and you got promoted. And most engineers only dream of getting promoted as many times as fast as you did. Like, you have almost the dream career. And as an engineering manager, it's depressingly common to see engineers kind of get stuck at a certain level. So they want to get promoted. They ping you, they ask for advice, they ask why it's not happening, but they get stuck. They cannot really evolve their behaviors, their thinking, their operation, their execution to a next level. And you manage to avoid plateauing for basically a very long and successful career. I was wondering if you have advice on how engineers can avoid the dreaded career plateau.
Okay, I have a lot to say here. I think the first item I would say is you have to want it. And I really wanted it. And you hear a lot of people say they want it, but the actions don't always follow as if they really want it. So, this is number 0, I guess. Like you have to really desire it and want it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen because it's going to be hard. It's not easy to do. It is a lot of effort and it's not guaranteed. So the prerequisite is you have to really want it to happen. If you want something to happen, you will make it happen regardless. Then
Can I stop you here just because I have a drill-in question? You said they say they want it, but their actions don't follow. Can you drill down into what they're missing?
I will.
Oh, fantastic.
I will drill down for sure. Then the second part is you have to make it known that you want it. Now, this means basically talking to everybody you can about it. And you're not telling them, hey, I want to get promoted, but you're asking them questions. What is the steps for me to perform at the next level? What do you think I'm missing? And you basically ask everybody that's more senior than you about this. You can also just ask them, how can I be more like you? What do you think I'm missing? All of these things. And that's not something you ask once a year. You ask it continuously. And basically all the time. You have to be to a point where you're almost annoying. I wasn't like that. I wasn't asking them all the time. But you have to be actively thinking about, what's the delta between me and this person that's a higher level than me? Frequently, you'll find that there's quite a lot of things, actually, especially if it's somebody more senior. But the important thing is to be focused on these things and be closing the gaps slowly but surely. Another thing I've seen is, and this can happen with, managers that are otherwise, maybe even, it might be a good manager, but this might be a point or a skill they're sort of not as good at, is you have to really make it known to the manager, to your manager, that you're going to do it. And you have to push them to create a plan and help you get to that level. I have seen people where they want to get promoted. They are disappointed that they have not been moving up. But in the last year or so, they have not actively talked to their manager about it. And not a very good manager will push you to get promoted. When you have this trait, you will push people to get to the next level. And that's a good thing, but it's rare from what I've seen. I think it's rare. And there's a sort of, it's just basic miscommunication between manager and junior engineer. So communication can be a hard thing, but it's very simple to fix. Just talk about it. Then the third thing is you have to put a lot of effort. You have to really try hard, and it's not enough to just be hardworking. I'm not saying just increase the hours you put in, but you also have to work hard and smart. Basically, you have to increase both your focus. You have to be ruthlessly focused on things that are actually impactful, that move the needle, and sort of like a horse with blinders on, avoid focusing on auxiliary things. I think engineers that are really motivated, and typically the people that want to get promoted are also the ones that are most motivated and most intrigued by the tech and the work. These people can also be distracted very easily. You can nerd snipe them very easily. You show them a cool new Rust project, and they may be reading the code for hours. So you want to avoid stuff like that. You really want to be ultimately focused on, your role at the company and how you can execute that successfully. But also, going to the next point, you have to always think a bit above your pay grade. You always have to push yourself to think a little bit above what your current role is telling you. So I'm not saying, shape the company's strategy. You don't have to think at the CEO's level pay grade, but always think a little bit above where you're at. So let's say you're a junior engineer and you're tasked with solving the small problem in this project. You can think above your pay grade in the sense of, okay, how does my code integrate with the rest? Would there be any bugs there? Do we have end-to-end coverage of these multiple components? How would this project ship? Why do we have this project? Similarly, if you're a staff engineer and you're leading the sort of multi-team project, you can think above it as well. How does this integrate with other components? What are other companies doing? What are our competitors doing like this? How does this fit to our strategy? What would this look like 1 to 2 years from now? You can always do more, basically. So this, again, this is what I mean by saying you have to try. You have to try hard, and you really want.
I think this is the most important thing you said so far in the interview. It's really easy to say, I'm going to work hard. As you said, push more hours, burn yourself out, which means that you are no longer thinking as creatively, no longer seeing the big picture because you're working too many hours and just tiring yourself out. And then the manager is telling you, no, what you did is not at the next level. You just did more of the old level, which means that you are not going to get the promotion you wanted. You will get frustrated. And if you make the mistake of saying, okay, I'll push even harder next quarter, it's just going to spiral down and down.
And that's a spiral. Yeah, that's a spiral to burnout. If you ask me, the definition of burnout is an imbalance of effort to reward ratio. Exactly. It's precisely when you put in so much effort, but you do not get what you want out of it. And that's where your energy just
what you want is not even a promotion for a lot of people. Like, what you want can be a fun project, or just enjoying what you do can be the thing you want. And if you put in a large effort, you're like, this is not leading me to a place where I wanted to be, then it's just gonna go. But if what you do doesn't work, do something else. And it sounds so trivial and so basic, and people don't do that.
Yeah, a lot of simple things are hard to do. Yeah. So we can continue. I have other things to say. You have to have a growth mindset, but I have to say you have to have a real growth mindset. So a normal growth mindset is one where somebody tells you you're wrong and you learn from your mistakes and you improve and you're open to, see how you can be wrong, how you can do things better. A real growth mindset is when you expect to be wrong. You have to, in many ways, especially if you're more junior, you should expect to be wrong in the sense that you should not be surprised when you make a major mistake. And the reason I say this is because the thing that stops people a lot and makes them stifled is two parts. First, they're afraid of being wrong. So many times they will not even speak up, which is an opportunity to learn. So they will not speak up even if it's right in cases. And the second thing is when they are wrong, they get discouraged and their motivation takes a hit. And then you sort of stop yourself from working as hard or whatever it is. So you need to expect both. You need to expect to be wrong. The only rule I can give to this is just don't make the same mistake again. If you make one mistake, write it down. I had a list of mistakes I've made, trust me, and they're hilarious. What I really wanted was just to never repeat the same mistake again. And as I was leading the team, I saw, my favorite engineers were the ones that were really trying. I don't care if they were wrong, if they were saying things that were blatantly wrong. As long as they were trying, they were some of my favorite engineers because I could see them grow by the day when you do that.
I 100% agree. I would also say that people imagine growth and leveling up a bit off. They kind of imagine that as they grow and level up, they keep getting better and better and better. And this is not how it goes. You get better, and then you start doing things that are new and you haven't done before. And you get worse. And as you said, you make a lot of mistakes, and you have to expect that. And then from those mistakes, you learn, and then you jump to the next level. But before you're at the next level, there is a period of time where you're actually kind of dropping in performance. You're doing worse because you're making those mistakes. And I would say that if you're not noticing a period where your performance dropped because you're making all those mistakes because you're doing stuff you haven't done before, you shouldn't expect to level up. You're not making enough mistakes to get better yet.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I definitely agree with that. That's 100% correct. And I think the final answer I can give is I'll give you two contradictory answers. The first answer is that you have to be very engaged and productive. So, this is, like I said, you have to just try hard and put a lot of effort. So you should be very engaged in your work and you have to be productive. That's how I did. I was extremely engaged throughout the whole time and I was pretty productive with the amount of things I was doing. I had, to give you some numbers, I had, what was it, number 8 in terms of commits in our private fork of Kafka, which is basically the main product we're working on. And we squash and merge commits, so basically a number of PRs merged. That was good. I had number 13 in top 13 in number of total Slack messages sent in the company throughout the life, out of like 5,000 plus people. I was surprised when I saw that. So this is just a proxy of how much effort and how much effort was put in. But then I want to give you the contradictory answer to that. Ignore these metrics. These metrics don't matter. It doesn't matter how many commits you did or how many Slack messages you sent. I would say avoid these fake productivity metrics and actually dig deeper to see where was the impact. How much impact did you do? I look at these things like Zoom meetings, Slack messages, PRs, emails sent. These are almost deterrents, or I would say obstacles in your path to doing something impactful. They're just something that needs to get, it's an obstacle you just have to jump over. You cannot impact, the product without shipping some code. But that doesn't mean you want to ship 1,000 PRs until you impact it. The best thing is to impact it without touching the code. Or the second best thing is with touching the code with one PR. Similarly with meetings and Slack messages and all of this. I think basically, like, summarizing in one word is find the most impactful thing to do and do it with the least effort possible. That's really it. We talk about 10x engineers. I want to say something a little bit off the beaten track, which is instead of focusing on how to be 10x, which you should focus again, you should think about how to do the impact. Try to focus on not being a minus 10x engineer or a minus 10 engineer. And to tell you what the minus 10 engineer is, I can give you some examples, but the summary is avoid doing wasted work. Like to be a minus engineer, you have to do something that isn't that impactful and takes a lot of time. We've had cases where we spent a month designing something, a whole quarter to ship it. It ends up being some big piece of code, like 3,000 to 4,000 lines of code. And then we realized 6 months later that this thing never worked and never did anything. And some engineer dives into it, debugs it, and says, hey, there's this simple bug here. That's why this doesn't work. The design is broken. And then he says, also, this shouldn't be 3,000 to 4,000 lines of code. It's very simple. You can do it in 300. So what you've done here is you've spent 3 months shipping something that overcomplicated the code, that risked regression, that didn't do anything for 6 months. Then you took time of some other senior engineer's time to debug and understand what's happening, design it anew, and maybe even ship the simpler version to fix the broken old version. So wall clock time, 9 months have passed, maybe a year has passed, and you have this case where the original engineer, and this is not to knock on anybody can make a mistake like this. I've surely done stuff like this, but the person in question could have literally taken the 3 months off, went to a beach, surfed every day, come back, and he would have been more impactful to the company than had he done this sort of feature. So what I'm trying to stress at is humans are wired to think that more is better, more resources, more stuff done is net better, but that's not always the case. More of the right things are better. More of the bad things is actually...
You want to be the other engineer, the one who showed up and said, A, it never worked. B, here's how you make it work in 300 lines.
No, ideally, you don't want this to happen. So you don't want to have this situation happen at all, I think. But yeah, if you have to choose...
Yeah, I mean, we both know that mistakes are not avoidable, right? This is the entire point.
Yeah, it will happen. So yeah, that's what I would say. Avoid this sort of wasted work and spend a little bit more effort on quality and thinking long term. I think this is the worst thing you can really do. In this another case, maybe that engineer would have went to their manager and say, hey, I shipped all of this. Like, I put so much effort into putting this thing in. And look, creating mistakes is a lot of effort as well. It is effort to design something complicated and ship it and get it approved and all of these things. So that's why I'm saying focus on the impact, not on any of these shallow metrics that don't mean anything.
I would even say that if this engineer have listened to the more senior guy saying, here's how you do it in 300 code, depending on the exact levels, I would have promoted. The guy showed hard work, lack of ego, dedication to do the right thing, even though I'm sure it was really hard personally, like you just wasted 9 months of your work, throw it away. Assuming the guy learned from the mistakes, it is promo worthy.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I think the lack of ego is the important thing. Like being able to, everyone, as you said, everyone can make mistakes. Can you learn from them?
Yeah, this part of the gold mindset. Actually, I should touch on that. Have no ego. When you expect to be wrong, you cannot have ego. When I joined Confluent, I knew that I was, I'll just be frank. I knew I was the least experienced engineer. I would say I was the dumbest engineer. And I was at the time. I literally had 1 year of experience compared to people who had 10 plus in good companies. So if you are surrounded by such people that are more senior than you, get the ego, like just destroy the ego and just be a sponge and absorb as much as you can. There's nothing that can go wrong with that.
Yeah, you said that for you, being very proactive and making those mistakes is your favorite thing in engineers. I would say for me, the favorite thing is just huge curiosity. How does this thing work? How can I make it better? What are, like you mentioned, the Azure project. There's a lot of big curious about. We expected X, Y turned out. So many different things to learn and explore. So having this level of learning driven by very deep curiosity is something that I think this is the trait that gets engineers to move up the curve fastest.
Agreed. Yeah, this is how you learn things that are above your level as well.
Yeah, you sit in a meeting and just listen.
and then asynchronously ask the people, what did this mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean by this?
Exactly. Yeah. How did you know to look in that direction? What made it attractive? What made this solution look better than the other solution?
Yeah, you're really just on a path to reverse engineer how a senior engineer works. that's
So you're now you're no longer, but you've spent the last year or so leading a large team, and I bet every engineer there wanted to get promoted, wanted to level up, and it was your role to help them. Was it just about giving them all the advice you just gave our listeners, or was there anything special you did to help them out?
Yeah, a bunch of things. So my situation was a little bit special in the sense that we had a geographical redistribution of our team, and we basically had 70% of our team come. They were brand new to the product, although they were in the company for 4 years, actually. So basically, they just shuffled the teams around a little bit. And these people had to get onboarded. And there were a lot of things to do to get them onboarded. To get them onboarded to be at the level where they need to be, and then think about going above and beyond as well to get promoted and grow. How did I go about this is, at the start, there were a lot of, there was a lot of writing a lot of documentation and sharing as much as I can with them and just talking to them a lot and presenting, etc. And then they can only onboard 2 projects, right? So we just gave them projects and just continued working as usual. And the thing that you have to do as a leader is you have to really make yourself available. You have to be available for them. You have to open communication channels with them. I think, the biggest advice to growing engineers I would give is have one-on-ones. It pains me to say it because I'm not somebody who's a fan of meetings. I don't particularly enjoy spending a lot of time on Zoom, having thousands of one-on-ones. But to be the most impactful, you just have to have one-on-ones with your team every week, with everybody. And I'll give you an example, Gwen. When I was more junior and you were my manager, I looked forward to our one-on-ones. I always left our one-on-ones with so much energy, and I always learned something new. And you always sort of unblocked me or put me down the right path. Maybe I was thinking of going this way, and you corrected me and basically saved me hours of time every time we met. So I was like, if only we can talk like every other day. That's how I felt. And now when I was leading the team in Confluent, I was seeing that in other people. I saw that they really looked forward to the one-on-ones. I saw them sharing something that just looked very wrong to me, and I would correct them and potentially probably save them a day or a couple of days worth of effort. So the more, the more in sync you are with your team, and this doesn't necessarily have to be meetings, but that's one medium to achieve it, the faster they're going to grow. Because through the meetings, they're always learning through you. They're always, if they're not asking you how you would do something, you're usually sharing how you would do it. And you're always talking to details, and you're indirectly teaching them technical details as well. You're sort of showing what the culture is like and what's the right thing to do in certain circumstances. You're brainstorming about the future, or what if this happens in the project, or what if this team tells us X, Y, Z, etc. And another very important thing with these one-on-ones is you're building trust, and you're building this sort of personal connection with the person that goes beyond work, ideally, which is important in its own right, but it's also important in the professional sense. Because as an engineer, as a senior engineer, or as a team lead, you're really just after the truth. You're trying to get to the truth of the matter as fast as possible. So if something is not working, if the project is not shipping on time, if this engineer doesn't seem productive, if you don't understand why something is taking so long, or you don't understand why something is so broken, you don't care about subjective opinions like, oh, is the engineer good or not, or is this the right person for the project, etc. No, you care about the specific reason. Why did this happen? And when you know the reason, you can objectively fix it. Because as a team lead, your goal is to just fix these things and have everything be working as smoothly as possible and as productively as possible. So you're just trying to get to the truth. And the only way to get to the truth is for the people to tell you in many cases. So at least the fastest, most efficient way is for them to tell you directly. And for them to tell you directly, they need to trust you. Because many times people will tell you some reason, but you have to dig deeper down and ask why a second time or a third time to actually get to the real reason. Because it's not, it's just human nature. You don't always feel comfortable sharing what it is out of fear, out of anxiety, out of all of these things. And 90% of the time, this sort of fear and anxiety is self-imposed. There's nobody in the team that's saying, hey, don't make mistakes, or, whatever it is. Nobody on the team is really forcing anything, but it's self-imposed because that's how the people think. And I think as a senior engineer, as a team lead, you're almost like you have to play the role of a sports psychologist. Like you have to get people to open up and feel comfortable, and then also motivate them to do something. I've had cases where people have been demotivated because, let's say, they've worked on this project, they've designed this large project for 1 or 2 months, and we get everything right. And then we raise it to senior leadership or a council, and they come back and they say, no, that's completely wrong. You have to do it a separate way. The engineer doing that is extremely demotivated for understandable reasons. So you have to be there to sort of make them know and tell them, hey, take a break, go outside today, forget about it, let's talk tomorrow. And then stress to them that this is part of growing as an engineer, and it's normal. You didn't do bad. We expected something like this. It can always happen. We'll learn for next time and have it go faster next time, etc. But yeah, this is the type of things you sort of.
I have something I wanted to kind of touch on. I asked you, like, just to make the connection, because I asked you about growing engineers in your team. And most of the really good advice you just shared is maybe a bit more as a manager, how do I get a team to ship good for software? And I'm wondering if it's because you believe that as long as the team is delivering good software, the promotions and everything they want and hope and dream of will show up for them. And all they need to focus on and all you need to focus on as a manager is how you get them to ship the good software, essentially.
Well, to an extent, but not only. I think shipping is an indirect proxy for how good you're operating at the level. A successful engineer will be able to ship despite whatever happens. And usually that's how you learn how to be a good engineer. You learn through these mistakes and you just become very efficient.
Got it. So you focus your manager mentoring and coaching. You gave a lot of good tips on how you can coach people and, as you said, get them to open up so you can give them more proper advice. So through this process of how to deliver great projects, you coach them and mentor them and get them to the next level, essentially.
Yes, because it's impossible to get someone to the next level without actually working on something, right? We can spend 20 hours just zooming about what it's like to be a senior engineer, but at the end of the day, you have to do it. And I think it's a good thing because the practice or the projects themselves are a forcing function for the growth. I don't think people would be motivated to grow if they didn't have projects to do as well. You get motivated when you do this project and it doesn't happen as easy as you thought. But there is a way for it to be easy, and then you learn. And next time it is easy, and usually that's when you get the promotion. That's when you know that you already sort of mastered.
Management has a political aspect of it. It's not enough to get work done. It's not enough that your team delivers. You need to create a certain impression in the company. You need to pave a path in the company. You're kind of responsible for interfacing the team with the rest of the company. And a lot of engineers don't go into leadership because they're like, I hate politics. I don't want to get anywhere near it. Just let me do my engineering job and leave me alone. How did you go about moving from an engineer who is like, leave me alone and let me code, to someone whose part of the role was to interface politics for their team?
Interface politics? Is that the word?
Navigate company politics. Like one of the role, I think people sometimes call it shit umbrella, but shit umbrella, it just means that you're protecting. And I think the role is more nuanced than that. And you have to carefully navigate navigation is a term that I like because you kind of carve a path for your team in a political landscape, I would say.
Okay. I have a controversial answer here. I might have just not realized if I do it, but my opinion on this is you just have to put yourself in a situation where you don't have to navigate politics. Just the word navigating politics already sort of triggers my engineering brain. Now, I'll be fair, politics are unavoidable and politics exist everywhere in the world, regardless of your level, role, or even profession. It exists on a personal level too. There's intra-family politics as well. It's all just human relations, right? At the end of the day. Somebody wants one thing, another person wants another thing. But when is life and the job most fun is when it works without politics, or without explicit politics. It's the best when things just jive together without even thinking about how to sort of negotiate things and stuff like that. And that's really how I did it, I believe. You may correct me if there were cases where I did something else, but from my memory and my general approach to it, I just didn't want to play any political games. I think because you can see advice online that says, play politics, but if you have to play it, and play here means doing something that's a little bit, let's say, not inauthentic, or dishonest in a way just to appease another party to get a result you want, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. You may get the thing that you want. People can get promoted just playing politics in a way. I don't know if I've seen it happen, but I've definitely heard about it happening. But at the end of the day, well, first, you won't even enjoy the job because who enjoys being a politician? who would like that? You can just go into politics if you want to. But the best thing about engineering is you just want to show up and engineer. And that's what makes engineers happy. At the same time, if you have to play politics, a reason I'm against it, honestly, is because it's you don't enjoy it. But Also, I think you can tell me if you agree with this, but what I believe is that when you start thinking too much about what to say, how to say it, who to say it to, and how to act, basically acting a little bit, I wouldn't say dishonestly, but a little bit inauthentically, people can sense that. And it comes out in ways that aren't immediately obvious. And people can't always put a finger on whether you're being inauthentic or maybe something else, but you always end up a little bit more stifled. You think a little bit more in between your words. Sometimes you may contradict yourself, stuff like that. And I think when you're really authentic and you're really saying what you believe and you act the way you like, of course, with a degree of respect and all of these things, that's table stakes, people like that more. And I think in the end, you end up kind of winning the political game. I wouldn't say winning, but you get up being liked just because people can see you're just here about doing the work. And from my experience, I always got along with people that were sort of more senior to me. I believe I got along with them because we were just aligned on the North Star, which was make the product better, make the company better, avoid problems in the company, and when a problem does arise, let's find the best way to solve it. So my answer to this would be, if you can, and if you can control it, you should always aim for it. Find the right team, find the right company, find the right place where you do not have to explicitly navigate politics to be successful or to get what you want. Ideally, it should just happen by itself. And if you're perfectly aligned, it will happen.
Yeah, I would say I agree with most of it. I do agree in being authentic in the sense of standing for what you believe in. And I do believe that if an engineer spends more than 10% of the time, or a manager spends more than 25% of the time doing politics, then they're probably not inputting enough in their real job. Did you ever do like quarterly planning? My guess is that yes, you
Yes.
had to get projects prioritized, you had to get resources. This is probably the most political part of a manager's role, right?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult. You have to really, that does involve a lot of preparation. I don't have any specific advice. I'm not sure if I did particularly successfully, but you really have to make the case for your own thing very well, and then really try to understand what a competing case is for something that's competing with your item that you want to prioritize. And at the end, whatever you believe in, you just make it known that it is what it is. If you manage to convince people, great. If you don't, then you have to accept the outcome.
But you mentioned moving to another company to avoid certain behaviors. And this kind of comes down to culture, I would say. Like, what does the culture of the company promote? And, in a large company, organizations have their culture, the teams have their culture. When you took over the team, did you have in mind like a vision of a culture that you wanted and kind of drove toward it?
Yeah, I did not have a particular vision. I had a goal though, and my goal was to not regress on the current culture. In fact, that was my sole goal. And it's really easy to regress in a culture when you're taking 70% new people or something like that. And it's way less risky and way easier to just ensure that you don't regress. Many times people can come, like maybe you hire a new VP or a manager or whatever, they come from some other culture, and they can sort of try to top down and say, okay, I believe this is what our new culture should be. This is extremely difficult to pull off. It's almost impossible.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah, culture is what you do, not what you say, right?
Also, but you can change code easily. It takes a long time to change humans. So in that sense, even if I could have thought of a better culture, I wanted to focus on the thing that's actually achievable and practical in the next, let's say, 6 months, and that was to keep the culture. And the way I did that was, well, first I extensively documented what we do, and so that was there. I introduced everyone to what we do, but more importantly, then I extensively reasoned about why we do it the way we do it. And there was always a great reason behind every sort of process or idea that we had on how to work together. And when I presented all of this, then I very aggressively asked almost everybody in the team, what do you think about this? Do you agree with everything? What do you think can be improved? Please give me feedback. Please leave comments. please say what it is. Basically, give ample opportunity for feedback and challenge somebody to challenge any of the things you shared. It's almost like you don't want to be the one that's pushing it top down. You want to be the one that's proposing it bottoms up, and then finding a way to work with everybody. Because as well, if 7 out of 10 people are new, they're the majority of the team, and if they don't agree with the culture, then maybe you should change your culture as well. And that's how
Did you have cases where you changed the culture too much, dear people?
No, actually, no. Nobody could really argue with all the things I was proposing. I think it was all sort of easier to work with than what some of the other teams had done before. And then when you do that, you have to lead by example. Nobody will follow a culture that you don't follow. I think one of the things about being a lead is also about the growth part. Growing engineers. If you want somebody to be performing at 100%, you as the lead should be performing at 120%, 120. You have to be doing more for the person that's sort of looking up to you to do at least that much. Otherwise, what human will say, okay, this person isn't even trying. Why would I try harder than them? In the same way is the culture. And I think that's even stronger because, just one mistake where you don't really follow the culture, and people will start to implicitly, maybe not even consciously, question, is this person really about that culture they're promoting? Do they actually believe in it?
And people will always try to align themselves with the lowest bars they can find an example of. So one example of you lowering the bar, and that you just set a new bar.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
Yeah. And there was nothing in the existing cultures where you were like, now that I have my own team, I am going to do it my way.
I think no.
Wow, you're super aligned. That's amazing.
I like the culture. Yeah. In fact, I just try to make some of the items stronger because, to be completely frank, your team didn't follow the culture 100% either. It's really hard to pull off 100%, and I wasn't a good example either. So it's nobody's fault. But the thing with the new team is just a fresh opportunity to sort of realign with what you think the culture should be and get a fresh start to implementing it. And I think we did a great job. The new team was really well set up for success. I'm really happy with how everybody did.
I think there were parts of Confluent culture that I couldn't wait to change in my... The most salient one is, you remember the don't ship on Friday afternoon or something like that? There used to be this kind of rule. We don't deploy after a certain hour on Friday. And I broke it even in Confluent numerous times. And I had my current co-founder got all the complaints about all the times I broke the rules. But when we started Nile, I'm like, we shouldn't be afraid of shipping ever. If there is a bug and we have a fix, it should get to customers as soon as humanly possible. So I was very insistent. We're going to ship on Fridays, we'll ship on Saturdays, we'll ship on Sundays. Basically, whenever we have a bug fix that needs to go to production, we should not be afraid of our own systems. And if there is anything in the system that makes us afraid to ship, we should fix the system. So, and the fact that we're afraid to ship is basically an indicator that we have work to do and fix things.
Yeah, I agree with that in principle, but I think in practice it's hard to pull off when you have a big machinery.
Maybe it's harder with big machinery. This is the nice thing about startup. I have tiny machinery. It's so easy to move the levers.
It is great.
But I do believe that if I set the culture right today, when it's a small team and we can still make things happen the way we envision, then as it grows and grows, we will have a lot more people like you who are like, yes, I love the culture here. And as I hire new people, I'm going to preserve it just the way it is.
Precisely, yeah. It's important. It's path dependent on how you grow it. But also even this thing in Confluent, I don't actually remember that being a hard rule. I remember shipping plenty of times on Fridays when the situation called for it.
Yeah, same here. But I also remember getting a lot of complaints. So yeah, it was fun.
I guess the problem is when you keep it subjective, then you can have both things happen. And that's
exactly. That's the thing with large companies. You have also different teams with different cultures. And during on-call, they're all in it together. And that's when the culture is kind of like how do we actually do things?
Yeah, and then you don't really even have a culture. It's sort of so vague that it doesn't make sense.
That makes sense. So we're running to the end of the hour, and I have one last question for you. It was a podcast about leadership and growing as an engineer, and you gave us tons of big tips. But I can't ignore the fact that you're the person who ran the largest Kafka clusters in the world, or at least very close to the top of the world, even though we may not be allowed to say exactly how big. And obviously, a lot of people listening to this are running their own Kafka clusters. And you have a very popular newsletter that comes with a Twitter channel and a newsletter in LinkedIn and all those things that is like 2-minute streams, all about short bites with good advice about streams-related things. So I'm starting the clock now. 2 minutes, your best advice about Kafka.
Okay, let's go. So you have to have metrics. I've seen so many customers and clients not have metrics, not have a good way to pull the metrics up. Without seeing what's happening, you can never fix anything. Then on these metrics, you put alerts and runbooks, pretty basic advice, but have clearly defined runbooks on what you do when something goes bad and have a threshold of what bad actually means. When do you want to wake up somebody versus when can it wait? Then actively upgrade. I saw so many customers on premise running old, ancient Kafka versions for no good reason. Kafka is very well tested. We always fix so many bugs, and really the software is so stable. You have no excuse to not upgrade actively. Then use well-supported clients as well. We had so many trouble with clients in Confluent after hosting so many clusters. You would see all sorts of workloads happening, and truth of the matter is that some of the clients just have some bad configurations, maybe even implementations. I remember having to change a config in a very popular client that's used everywhere. In 2022, I had to change the config. A retry timeout config was set to 1 second, when the default in Kafka was 15 seconds. So stuff like this could really cause like trouble and connection storms for no good reason. So use well-supported clients. I recommend the Confluent clients, just not only because I worked in Confluent, but because Confluent has the incentives aligned. You have, you're the one developing the client and you're the one suffering when the client doesn't work. So you're going to fix it immediately. Then what else? How's the time? You have a capacity plan. Be ready to add bulkers when you need to. Don't push your cluster to the very limit. It's going to be very hard to upgrade last minute when you really, really need to. It's not that fast. When you're deploying the cluster and creating it, think hard about the instance type and the amount of bulkers that you want to have. Run a lot of performance tests and stress tests, and even all the Kafka is so configurable. You should really spend and invest time in testing it a lot and trying a lot of configurations and finding something that works. Use tiered storage and manage clients via libraries.
2 minutes of amazing Kafka advice. Thank you so much, Stan, for the Kafka advice and for advice for leaders and for advice for engineers who really want to level up and be the most promoted engineers in their company. It's been amazing to have you here.
Yeah, we can talk for many hours more. Thanks so much for having me.